Get him out of here. The order cracked across the Grand Salon ballroom, and the room obeyed it before most people had even understood what they were watching. Two security guards seized Kang Min-jae by the arms and dragged him off the stage, while a forest of phones rose from the tables below. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead. Violin music died mid-note. The founder of Hanul Group, the man whose arrival used to pull every back a little straighter in a room, lost his balance on the edge of the stage and nearly went down on one knee in front of 300 guests who had spent the last decade trying to impress him. "Take your hands off me," Min-jae snapped, wrenching hard enough to make one guard stumble. His voice still carried authority. His position no longer did. Cha Do-jin stood at the podium in a charcoal suit that fit him too well for the night to be accidental. Min-jae's cousin kept one hand on the microphone and the other on a leather folder, his expression arranged into something almost solemn. "For the protection of Hanul Group," Do-jin said, "the board has voted to suspend Chairman Kang Min-jae pending investigation into fraud, misappropriation of company funds, and gross abuse of executive authority." A murmur spread through the ballroom. It had the soft, eager sound of rich people smelling blood while pretending they were worried about ethics. Min-jae twisted again and shouted, "You filed this before the gala even started." Do-jin lowered his eyes, all polished regret. "You left the board no choice. That would have been ugly enough." Then Yoo Hae-rin stepped forward. The ring Min-jae had planned to give her was still in his pocket. Hae-rin took the second microphone with both hands and looked out at the guests, as if she were about to deliver a eulogy for a man still standing 10 feet away. "I tried to believe the rumors weren't true," she said, voice measured and soft. "I defended him because I loved him. I cannot do that anymore." That landed harder than the accusation. Min-jae forgot the guards for a second, forgot the lawyers along the walls, forgot the investors filming him like he was a public execution with dessert service. He stared at Hae-rin and said quietly, "You knew before tonight." Hae-rin did not answer him. She didn't need to. Her silence did the work. The guards hauled him toward the lobby. His shoulder slammed into the edge of a champagne tower. Glass chimed. Somebody laughed and tried to hide it inside a cough. Another guest stepped sideways to get a better angle for the video. At the service wall, where hotel staff had been lined up to vanish politely until called for, Amanda Brooks watched every second of it. Her shift had ended 20 minutes earlier. Her housekeeping badge still hung at her waist. A paper bag with rice, eggs, and her grandmother's cough medicine rested against her ankle. While the guests stared at Min-jae, Amanda watched the things that mattered. One of Do-jin's legal assistants was already collecting signed resolutions from the board table. A security supervisor near the side door was texting updates to someone outside. Hae-rin's mascara had not moved a fraction. That meant the grief had been rehearsed. By the time security shoved Min-jae through the glass doors and his overnight case skidded across the wet stone outside, Amanda had counted 3 cameras at the curb and one black sedan idling just far enough back to look innocent. The doors sealed shut. Min-jae stood in the rain, chest heaving, one hand flat against the glass as if the building might remember him if he touched it long enough. Inside, nobody moved to open the door again. They had already begun rearranging themselves around his absence. A photographer stepped closer. Another lifted his camera. Somebody called out, "Chairman Kang, did you steal from your own redevelopment fund?" Then Amanda's voice came from behind him, level and calm. "If you stay where you are," she said, "they'll make sure tomorrow's headlines look even uglier than tonight." Min-jae turned. She stood under a black umbrella that had lost one rib and kept working anyway. Young, black, American by the shape of the vowels. Cheap coat, steady eyes. Nothing in her face suggested pity. Nothing in it suggested awe. "Do I know you?" he asked. Amanda tipped the umbrella just enough to cover him more than herself. "No, but I know the sedan at the curb belongs to your cousin's security consultant, and I know Hae-rin's publicist sold your collapse before the cake was cut." That made him look toward the street. She nodded toward the side of the hotel. "You can stand here and let them eat the rest of you with a lens. Or you can come with me." He stared at her, rain running from his hair into his collar. "Why would I trust a stranger from housekeeping?" Amanda shifted the grocery bag to her other hand. I'm not asking for trust. I'm pointing out the trap is still open. Then she turned and walked toward the service entrance. He stayed where he was for 1 second. Then 2. On the third, a flash hit his face from the curb, and he grabbed the case and followed her. She moved through the hotel the way only staff ever did, through loading corridors and laundry passages and a steel stairwell that smelled faintly of detergent and steam. The luxury disappeared in those spaces. No orchids, no marble, no soft music pretending life had no edges. Just carts, pipes, hot metal, and the people who kept expensive places alive without ever appearing in the story the rich told about them. Min-jae nearly turned toward the executive elevator from pure reflex. Amanda caught his sleeve and pulled him the other way. That route gets you arrested in under a minute. You sound very sure. I work around powerful people. They become predictable when they think everyone else is beneath notice. They crossed 2 back streets and climbed 6 flights in an old brick building that leaned slightly toward the next one, like it had spent years surviving on stubbornness alone. Amanda opened the rooftop apartment. 1 room, 1 tiny kitchen. A curtain dividing off a mattress on the floor. A folding sofa that had lost its fight with comfort long ago. A woman in her 60s shelling peas at the table. A teenage boy looking up from a schoolbook with a pencil frozen in midair. Amanda shut the door behind them and said, "Grandma, this is Min-jae." "Malik, move your backpack." Grandma Brooks adjusted her glasses and studied the dripping billionaire in her doorway. "Is he trouble?" Amanda set the groceries on the counter. He arrived wrapped in it. Malik let out a laugh before he could stop himself. Min-jae stayed by the door, rainwater pooling under his shoes, still trying to understand how the night had gone from stage lights to this tiny room with peeling paint and a woman who sounded mildly inconvenienced by scandal. Amanda took a towel from a drawer and held it toward him. "Dry off before you drip on everything." He took it this time. "You still haven't told me why you brought me here." Amanda crossed to the stove, reheated soup, and set a bowl at the table. Questions work better when your blood sugar isn't trying to leave your body. "If I say no," Grandma Brooks clicked her tongue, "then you'd be rude as well as ruined." That nearly pulled a smile from him. Nearly. He sat because his body made the choice before his pride did. Amanda waited until he had finished half the bowl. Then she reached above the fridge, took down an old metal tin, and spread its contents across the table. A company ID badge. A newspaper clipping with Min-jae's face on the front page. A faded photo of a man in a hard hat standing outside a construction fence. A folded letter. A flash drive wrapped in a pharmacy receipt. Amanda sat opposite him and said, "I knew who you were before you turned around in the rain." The spoon stopped in his hand. She touched the photo. "That's my father, Daniel Brooks, compliance auditor on one of Hanul's redevelopment projects. He used to think systems could be cleaned from the inside if enough people refused to lie at the same time." Min-jae looked at the face in the photograph and felt the outline of a memory he could not fully catch. Hard hat, site visit, too many years. Too many men turned into summaries before they ever reached his desk. "I don't remember him," he said. Amanda did not flinch. "That tracks." Grandma Brooks folded her hands on the table. Malik closed his book without pretending he wasn't listening anymore. "My father died with his name ruined," Amanda said. "Money disappeared from a redevelopment fund. Someone needed a scapegoat. Daniel Brooks fit the role better than the men who actually set it up. And you still pulled me out of the rain." Amanda unfolded the letter, but her eyes stayed on his. "3 days before he died, my father gave me this drive and that letter and told me one thing. If Kang Min-jae ever falls in public, don't decide too quickly whether you're looking at the criminal or the man somebody needed in the crosshairs." That brought a long silence. Min-jae looked at the flash drive. "You haven't opened it. It's encrypted. Then why keep it this long?" Amanda rose, crossed to the wall beside the window, and took down the notice pinned there. She set it in front of him. Hanul Group letterhead. District 8 Redevelopment Acceleration Order. His digital authorization stamp at the bottom. Min-jae's whole focus narrowed. "What is this?" Amanda asked. He read the page twice, slower the second time. "I signed a district review. I did not approve forced relocation without full resident support." Amanda gave a tired little laugh. That distinction probably sounds thoughtful from your side of the paper. It matters. To the families losing their homes? To whether someone altered this after it left my office. Amanda leaned against the counter, arms folded. My grandmother and my brother don't get to live inside executive nuance, Mr. Kang. Your name on the page was enough to turn our lives into a timetable. A fist slammed once against the gate downstairs. Then again. A man's voice called up the stairwell in Korean, asking whether anyone had seen the former chairman. Malik half rose. Amanda crossed to the window, lifted the curtain a fraction, and let it fall. 3 men. One of them thinks expensive cologne makes him look competent. Min-jae stood. They're here because of me. Amanda stepped in front of the door. Then the least useful thing you can do is confirm it. She went downstairs alone. Min-jae took one instinctive step after her, then stopped himself. He was a guest in somebody else's danger now. That was new. Muffled voices drifted up through the stairwell. Amanda answered in quick, even Korean, the tone of a woman whose patience had been interrupted by fools she could outthink in her sleep. The exchange lasted less than a minute. When she came back, she was carrying the cough medicine as if that had been her only errand. What did you tell them? Min-jae asked. Amanda set the bottle on the counter. That the only man who passed through here tonight was my brother's math tutor, and if they wanted to keep harassing women after midnight, they should bring a warrant next time. Grandma Brooks raised an eyebrow. You're leaving out the decorative part. Malik grinned. She also asked the tall one whether he borrowed his shoes from a cousin with worse taste. That earned a brief sound from Min-jae, not quite a laugh, but close enough to remind him he was still capable of one. By morning, the city had already settled on its version of his fall. Every screen carried some variation of the same story. Founder under investigation, fiancé heartbroken, board forced into action. Anonymous insiders describing years of instability. Hyrin appeared on television in a cream coat with grief arranged carefully enough to survive high definition, and told a breakfast show host she would always care about Min-jae as a human being while supporting accountability as a citizen. Amanda muted the television before the sentence could finish bruising the air. An emergency shareholder vote had been scheduled in 9 days. The demolition fast-track meeting for District 8 would happen the next morning after that. The timing was so neat it was offensive. Min-jae stood by the sink reading the district notice again. Doojin's clearing the district while everyone's staring at me. Amanda dried a bowl and set it aside. That sounds less like a revelation and more like the first honest thought you've had since the ballroom. He looked at the flash drive. If there's proof on this, we need the key. Amanda nodded once. My father left one clue, the place where the sky began. He answered immediately. Sky Garden. Amanda stopped drying the bowl. That means something to you. It was my first rooftop project. Before Hanul got big enough to confuse speed with intelligence, the original secure archive server was hidden there, and Sky Garden now belongs to the residence wing attached to Grand Song. Yes, Amanda set the bowl down carefully. Then we walk back into the machine that just spit you out. He looked at her. If we get the key, I can stop the district order. Amanda's gaze hardened. There you go again. What? Talking like getting your power back and making one correction erases the people who got flattened by the rest of your empire. He didn't answer right away. That mattered. Finally he said, then tell me what you need. I need the truth, Amanda said. I need my father's name back. I need that district protected. And I need to know whether you're trying to reclaim a throne or become somebody who deserves to speak in the same room as people like us. Grandma Brooks sipped her tea. That sounded expensive. Min-jae glanced at the district notice in his hand and said, then we stop the demolition first. That was the first thing Amanda heard from him that sounded like the beginning of change instead of the defense of old habits. The way back into Sky Garden belonged to Amanda, not him. She drew the route on the back of a grocery receipt. Service lifts, linen carts, camera blind spots, the hallway the engineers always forgot because no guests ever walked it, the timing of the late-night turn-down crew in the residence wing. She knew which doors swelled in humid weather and stuck. She knew where security lingered when management wanted to feel serious, and where they got lazy when the people moving through the corridor wore uniforms and kept their heads down. Min-jae watched the map take shape under her pen and understood, perhaps for the first time, that the people his world treated like background often knew the structure better than the people claiming ownership of it. That evening, he wore Malik's old hoodie beneath a maintenance jacket that fit him badly enough to be insulting. Amanda glanced at him once and said, "Good. You finally look like a man who has to stand in line." They entered through the loading corridor. Amanda pushed a linen cart. Min-jae carried folded towels and kept his head down. A security guard glanced at Amanda's clipboard and waved them through without seeing either of their faces properly. That was how power failed. Not always through cracks, but through habits. "Do they really talk that freely around you?" Min-jae whispered in the service lift when an executive had just passed them complaining into his phone about the founder mess and the district people. Amanda kept her eyes on the floor numbers. They talk most freely around the people they've already decided won't matter later. Sky Garden was dim when they reached it. The plants still looked alive. Somebody on staff had been doing that work while the residents admired the view and called it atmosphere. Amanda crouched behind a decorative irrigation panel and ran her fingers beneath the frame until she found the catch. "Here." Min-jae keyed in the first code from memory. "Rejected." Then another. "Rejected again." Amanda looked at him. If men with money didn't love nostalgia, this would actually be funny. He bent closer and saw, under the dust, a scratched phrase along the edge of the panel. "First sky. First lie." Doojin had known about the archive route all along. Min-jae entered the revised sequence. The panel clicked open. Inside sat an old Haniel phone, a docking reader, a sealed envelope marked with Daniel Brooks's employee number, and a backup card. Amanda took the envelope first. Before she could open it, footsteps sounded at the far end of the lounge. A guard called out, "Housekeeping shouldn't be on this floor after 9. Amanda stood smoothly and pushed the cart forward. "The vent team changed the linen route again," she said in Korean. "If the managers want perfection, they can at least leave decent instructions." The guard stepped closer. His eyes moved past her and landed on Min-jae. Amanda did not wait for recognition to become action. She shoved the cart straight at him. Towels and sheets spilled across the floor. The guard swore and bent by reflex. Min-jae grabbed the docking reader. Amanda seized the envelope. Then they were moving. Through the maintenance hall, down one flight, past the florist prep room, into a service closet, while the guard's radio burst to life outside. Out again through catering storage. At the loading exit, the camera above the door pivoted. Amanda heard the tiny mechanical whir and looked up without meaning to. The lens caught her face cleanly. Back at the rooftop apartment, the old phone unlocked under the reader and did not give them everything. It gave them enough to make the next step more dangerous. The archive confirmed linked hidden files across multiple Haniel entities and pointed to one final paper ledger stored off-site. The envelope contained a photocopy of shell payments tied to one of Dojin's redevelopment contractors and a handwritten note from Daniel Brooks. Amanda read the last line aloud. "The final ledger is where the river road used to end." Malik sat up straighter. "The old planning office by Riverside Lot 12. Amanda nodded. "Dad took me there when I was little, before they fenced off half the district." Then Min-jae's recovered phone lit up with delayed alerts, one after another. Grand Song suspends housekeeper Amanda Brooks pending internal investigation. Questions raised about relationship between ousted founder and hotel employee. District 8 resident compliance review escalated. Amanda looked at the screen and handed it back. That took longer than I expected. The retaliation widened fast. By the next afternoon, the pharmacy downstairs had frozen Grandma Brooks's account pending a compliance review. Malik's scholarship portal showed an administrative hold. Hiron's team was pushing rumors about Amanda attaching herself to a desperate billionaire. One school administrator suggested Malik take a few days away from class until the scandal cooled. The building manager for their rooftop apartment suddenly remembered a list of code violations nobody had mentioned in years. The attack had moved from headlines into groceries, medicine, rent, and school. That was how powerful people punished without needing to look violent. Amanda went with Malik to the school the next morning. The vice principal received them in an office decorated with awards about character and excellence. He wore a sympathetic expression that made Amanda distrust him on sight. People who want to do right rarely polish their sorrow before speaking. "We're concerned," he began, finger steepled on the desk. "The situation around your family has become distracting for the student body." Malik sat very straight in the chair beside her. "I'm distracting?" The vice principal gave him a patient smile. "No one is saying that. We simply want to protect the school environment." Amanda folded her hands in her lap. By placing his scholarship on hold because his sister was photographed near a scandal? The man cleared his throat. "There are donor sensitivities." "Of course there are." He glanced down at the file in front of him instead of at her face. That was the first thing she noticed. The second was that he used the phrase, "your circumstances," twice in 3 sentences, and never once said Hunnell Group out loud. "We'd like to revisit his eligibility pending a review." Malik started to speak. Amanda touched his sleeve lightly and answered for both of them. "My brother's grades didn't collapse, his conduct record didn't change, his work didn't weaken. What changed is that adults with more money than spine made one phone call." The vice principal's smile tightened. "Miss Brooks, I understand this is emotional." Amanda stood. "No, you understand it's ugly, that's a different thing." She took Malik's hand and walked out before the man could dress cowardice in any more careful language. Outside the school gates, a woman in a tailored beige coat stepped forward from a parked car. She was too polished to belong to the street and too calm to be there by chance. "Ms. Brooks," the woman said, "could I have a moment?" Amanda did not stop walking. "If you're selling umbrellas, I'm already disappointed. My employer asked me to speak with you quietly." That got Amanda to turn. The woman handed her a card with no company name, only a number. "There is an apartment available in Busan, a year's rent prepaid. Your brother's scholarship issue would disappear. Your grandmother's medical accounts would be settled. All it requires is distance from this matter and a brief statement that you were misled." Malik looked at Amanda. Amanda looked at the woman. Then she laughed, not loudly. Just enough to make the woman's calm crack for 1 second. "You came to buy my silence outside a school," Amanda said. "You should be embarrassed." The woman's voice cooled. "You should be practical." Amanda tore the card in half, then into quarters, and dropped the pieces into the woman's manicured hand. "Tell your employer she keeps shopping for people who don't know their own price. That's why she keeps misunderstanding this story." Malik exhaled only after they were half a block away. "You okay?" Amanda asked. He nodded, then shook his head. "I kind of hate all of them." "Good," Amanda said. "That means you're paying attention." Min-jae stood through all of it and finally said, "I'm leaving tonight." Amanda kept stacking bills into a neat pile. "That seems wise." "They're going after your family because of me." "They're going after my family because people like your cousin can't tolerate being disobeyed by anyone they think should be grateful to exist. I can route money through third parties." Amanda looked up sharply. "No." He stopped. "If you help this family," she said, "you do it where the light can touch the help. I'm not interested in one more secret act of generosity from a man whose world ran on hidden damage." He absorbed that in silence. Malik muttered, "For what it's worth, leaving might not make them stop." Min-jae turned toward him. The boy shrugged one shoulder. "They already know Amanda matters to you, or they think she does. That's probably enough." Grandma Brooks set a cup of tea in front of Min-jae. "Go if you must, just don't confuse disappearing with repairing." He left anyway. For 2 days he saw the city the way Hanul reports never described it. He sold his watch and paid the pharmacy in person. He waited at the district office beside old residents trying to make sense of relocation forms written by people who had never once imagined being on the receiving end of them. He stood in line at Malik's school administrative building because rich men are still useful when they frighten cowards into doing paperwork correctly. He rode buses with District 8 residents and listened while an old man explained the difference between being offered money and being offered a future. One of those makes you feel temporarily expensive. The other lets you sleep. He also went looking for Daniel Brooks's missing witness chain, The first name on the archived list belonged to a former compliance clerk named So Yoon-hee, who now worked nights at a laundromat near the river. She took one look at him when he stepped through the fluorescent wash of the machines and said, "You shouldn't be here." Min-jae stood among tumbling towels and the low hum of dryers, suddenly aware of how often men like him walked into other people's fear and called it urgency. "I need to know what Daniel tried to give the board before he died." Yoon-hee fed quarters into a machine without looking at him. "I have children." "So did he." That made her flinch. She lowered her voice. "Doojin's people came to me 2 years ago. They knew my son's bus route. They knew my daughter's tutor. They never said the word threat. They didn't need to." Min-jae watched her fingers tremble as she smoothed a stack of folded shirts that needed no smoothing. "What did Daniel leave you?" Yoon-hee opened a small locker behind the folding table and took out a battered USB drive the size of a thumb. "Names? Meeting dates? The minutes Dojin had altered after district audits. I kept a copy because Daniel didn't trust systems anymore." She looked up at him then, eyes sharper than fear. "If I hand this to you, will you save yourself with it and leave the rest of us in the same machinery?" He could have answered quickly. Once, he would have. Now he said, "I don't know yet what I deserve. I know what Dojin deserves. I know what District 8 deserves. That has to be enough for this hour." Yoon-hee stared at him, weighing whether honesty from a powerful man was courage or simply an unfamiliar form of manipulation. Then she handed him the drive. When he left the laundromat, 2 men were waiting near the corner in contractor jackets too clean for real work. He kept walking. One stepped out. Chairman Kang. Min-jae stopped 3 feet away. "You should choose better shoes if you're trying to look ordinary." The man smiled without warmth. "Mr. Cha wants you to understand that old women and schoolboys don't benefit from prolonged drama." That line might have worked better if Min-jae hadn't already seen what Dojin's version of peace cost. He stepped closer. "Tell your boss the next person he sends to mention that family should arrive ready to be remembered in court." The men let him pass. They didn't follow. They didn't need to. Threats like that do their work by echoing. Amanda saw him once across the market arguing with a vendor who had raised prices for residents from her building. He won the argument without making himself the center of it and carried the groceries away alone. She did not approach him. That night, the old phone yielded it its first video. Daniel Brooks appeared under weak garage lighting, tie loose, eyes worn down by the kind of truth that no longer fits in a man's body comfortably. "If Amanda is watching this," Daniel said, "I've likely run out of time." Grandma Brooks covered her mouth. Daniel took a breath and continued. The money was siphoned through redevelopment contractors beneath public review. Chado-jin set the route. Yuhae-rin prepared media language before any official complaint existed. They were building a sacrifice before the public ever knew there was a crime. Min-jae leaned forward. Daniel's tired eyes seemed to settle through the grain and years toward him. Kang Min-jae did not invent this theft. He did build a machine where interruption looked like weakness, and people on the ground became delays in a projection. Then came the sentence Amanda had waited years to hear, and still wasn't ready for. Kang Min-jae is not the thief. He is also not innocent. Nobody moved. Daniel named the shell companies, named the altered district reports, named Riverside Lot 12 as the location of the final ledger. Then he said, "If you prove the theft, do not let anyone turn that into absolution." The harm was real, long before the money moved. The video ended. Amanda went to the window and stood there long enough for the room to feel the shape of her silence. At last she said, "If I help clear your name, what happens when you get your power back and everybody like my father becomes invisible again?" Min-jae answered honestly, "I don't know." That hurt more than a polished lie would have. If a story ever leaves you arguing with yourself in the middle, that's where the interesting questions usually start. "Tell me this much. Could you stand beside someone who didn't personally ruin your family, but built the machinery that made your ruin efficient?" Riverside Lot 12 smelled like old rain, rust, and demolition. The planning office at the back of the property was scheduled to come down in less than 40 hours. The upper floors had already been gutted. Only the basement records rooms remained, hidden behind a temporary wall and a timetable. Amanda insisted on going. Min-jae did not waste energy pretending he could stop her. They entered through a gap in the fence after midnight. The basement swallowed their footsteps in damp concrete and stale paper. Amanda led them by memory and instinct, flashlight cutting through rows of leaning file cages. "My father hated this place," she said softly. "He used to say the whole basement was built like the people upstairs, resented evidence for existing." A beam of light flashed briefly across the far corridor and vanished. Min-jae raised a hand, voices above them, more than one. Amanda's mouth hardened. "They're here too." The records duct sat behind a collapsed wall in the rear office. Amanda found the latch under a strip of peeling paint and forced it open. Inside lay 3 ledgers sealed in plastic, a witness list, and one final note in Daniel Brooks' handwriting. Then a shout came from the hallway. Malik's voice. Amanda froze for one sharp second. He had followed them. 2 men in contractor jackets dragged him into the doorway, one with a phone out, both wearing the easy confidence of men who thought fear belonged to them by default. Amanda moved first. She hurled the metal flashlight into the man with the phone. It hit his wrist hard enough to send the device spinning into the dark. Malik kicked free, but the second man caught his jacket. Min-jae hit him low and drove him into a cabinet. Amanda yanked Malik behind her, seized the ledgers, and slammed the office door into the other man as another voice shouted from the stairwell. "More men." "Back wall," Amanda snapped. There was a narrow opening behind the collapsed shelving, barely wide enough to crawl through. Malik went first. Amanda shoved the records after him. Min-jae covered the gap, took a blow across the shoulder that lit his whole arm with pain, then forced himself through as the office door burst open behind them. They dropped into a drainage passage and crawled through rust flakes, cold water, and old concrete until the passage spat them out behind the fence into an alley slick with darkness. They ran. At the clinic, with Malik wrapped in a blanket and trying too hard to look unbothered, Amanda finally saw the blood seeping through Min-jae's sleeve. "You're hurt." He glanced down as if it belonged to somebody else. Apparently. When Malik went to get water, Min-jae sat under the fluorescent hum and told the truth cleanly. "I signed the restructuring model 7 years ago," he said. "I gutted the resident review board because investors wanted speed. Daniel Brooks objected. I remember deciding he was making the machine slower." Amanda stared at him. He went on before she could stop him. "I didn't know Dojin was stealing through those channels. I did know I had built channels where empathy looked inefficient." She let the words settle and then said quietly, "So even after all this, my family still got crushed by a decision you made in an office because it sounded efficient." He nodded. There was nothing to soften that with. Back at the rooftop apartment, dawn took its time arriving, which made everything feel more exposed. Amanda read Daniel's last note alone by the window. Parcel numbers, witness names, and one line in her father's handwriting that landed harder than any legal evidence in the room. If he ever learns to see people clearly, he'll either become dangerous to the right men or useless to himself. She folded the note once, very carefully. Then she left. Not with a scene. Not with tears. She just left a message with Grandma Brooks and disappeared for a day because there are truths a person has to carry alone before deciding whether they can carry them beside someone else. Min-jae did not chase her. That restraint cost him more than the shoulder. Dojin felt the shift and pushed harder. The shareholder vote was moved up by 6 hours. Hiron's team circulated a memo implying Amanda had fabricated evidence after being manipulated by a desperate billionaire. Somebody leaked Grandma Brooks's address to a gossip account. Then Hiron called Amanda directly and offered money, relocation, and silence, wrapped in a voice trained to sound reasonable. Amanda listened until Hiron said, "Save your family, the rest of the fallout." Then Amanda answered, "You still think this has a price," and hung up. Meanwhile, without telling Amanda, Min-jae signed the one document the old version of himself would have called madness. He transferred recovered controlling power into a court-supervised restitution and community oversight trust for 5 years if the case succeeded. He added resident review authority, District 8 protections, the Brooks Fund, and personal liability language attaching his own signature to the structural negligence that had made the theft possible. Marcus read the papers twice. You know what this does? Min-jae sat in the bare apartment Marcus used for crisis meetings and said, "It makes the win cost me something. It exposes you. It should." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. She still doesn't know. No. Are you hoping that counts as noble? Min-jae closed the file. I'm hoping it doesn't count as persuasion. Amanda came back because Malik found her. He sat beside her at the harbor and said, "He signed something stupid, didn't he?" That pulled a reluctant breath of laughter out of her. Marcus looked like a man who'd been hit with ethics, Malik added. That usually means Min-jae did something expensive. Amanda stared at the water. Malik went on, quieter now. If change doesn't cost him, you'll never believe it. Right? No, Amanda said. I won't. And if it does? Amanda took longer with that answer. Then I still get to decide what it buys. Before the hearing, Amanda made one more stop. Daniel's video had named a retired site engineer, Mr. Han, as a silent witness to the altered district reports. Marcus had already spoken to him once and got nothing but fear. Amanda went alone to the church basement, where he volunteered sorting food boxes because frightened people often tell the truth more easily to those who remind them of the life they're trying to protect. Mr. Han was stacking canned soup in a back storeroom when Amanda found him. He looked older than the voice on the phone had sounded. Tired shoulders, careful hands. The posture of a man who had spent years making himself smaller so consequences might pass him by. I already told the lawyer I'm not testifying, he said before she could introduce herself. Amanda nodded. I know. Then why are you here? She looked around the storeroom at the donation boxes, the leaky ceiling stain, the folding chairs stacked against the wall. Because men like Dojin build whole empires on the assumption that people like you and me will keep calculating survival in private and calling it wisdom. Mr. Han gave a thin, unhappy laugh. Wisdom feeds children. So does courage sometimes. He looked at her then, properly, and saw something in her face that made him stop reaching for polite excuses. Amanda told him about the school, the pharmacy, the apartment pressure, the woman outside the gates with the price tag in her pocket. She told him about Daniel Brooks dying with the truth half buried, and about the district residents who still didn't know whether they'd be sleeping under their own roofs next month. Then she said, You don't owe Hanul anything. You don't owe Min-jae forgiveness. You do owe yourself the chance to stop living like fear is the highest form of prudence. Mr. Han sat down on a folding chair very slowly. After a long silence, he said, Dojin didn't steal because he was clever. He stole because he understood that everyone above him wanted speed, and everyone below him was too afraid to interrupt it. That made him feel invincible. Amanda pulled out Daniel's copied report and set it on the table between them. Mr. Han looked at the paper a long time. Then he nodded once. I'll testify, he said. But if I do, I want it on record that the founder's negligence was part of the rot. I won't help clean one lie by creating another, Amanda said. Good. Neither will I. The hearing room was full long before it began. Investors, reporters, prosecutors, residents from District 8, board members suddenly eager to rediscover principles. Rain slicked the plaza outside. Inside, everyone performed respect for procedure while waiting to see whose life would get fed into it next. Amanda arrived in a plain navy dress and a coat worn smooth at the cuffs. She did not try to look like she belonged to their world. She looked like herself, which unsettled the room more than imitation ever would have. Hiren intercepted her near the entrance. You really mean to walk in there, Hiren said. Amanda adjusted the strap of her bag. That's usually how rooms work. Hiren lowered her voice. No one in there will forget what you are. Amanda met her eyes. A woman who remembers what you said when you thought I didn't count. Yes, I'd worry about that. Inside, Dojin opened with practiced composure. Fiduciary duty, painful necessity, heartbreak over Min-jae's decline, commitment to truth. Every sentence polished until it could have passed for virtue in a weaker room. Then Marcus entered the evidence. Security logs, phone records, shell transfers, the retired site engineer, the Riverside Ledger, Daniel Brooks's recorded testimony. Piece by piece, the neat story Hyrin and Dojin had built began to collapse under specifics. Then Hyrin made the mistake Amanda had been waiting for. This proceeding, Hyrin said, is being distorted by a suspended employee with obvious personal motives. A maid with a grudge is not a compliance system. Amanda rose before Marcus had to ask. She did not rush. A maid with a grudge, she repeated. That phrase tells me you still haven't understood the simplest part. The room went still. I cleaned your executive suites, Amanda said. I changed the glasses after your strategy dinners. I stood in hallways while assistants threw away drafts they thought were harmless, because nobody taught them to fear the woman carrying the tray. I heard investors describe District 8 as low-friction land, when they meant poor families. I heard one of Hyrin's assistants ask whether the sympathetic interview should be booked before or after the gala. That was 3 days before the charges were filed. Pens moved faster in the press row. Amanda kept her voice even. People with power are honest all the time, just not to the people they consider their equals. They say the ugliest things in elevators, beside service doors, over half-finished dessert, in front of the woman replacing the water glasses, because they think a uniform means memory doesn't matter. Nobody stopped her. You called me a maid, like it made what I saw smaller. Amanda said. It made it sharper. I know Sky Garden's archive route, because housekeeping had the master access before the residence wing was privatized. I know the 6th floor camera lagged because engineering never fixed it. I know Daniel Brooks's reports disappeared after 3 specific meetings because I was the one clearing cups outside those offices. Then she gave the room the line it deserved. The problem here isn't that I don't belong in this room. The problem is that people like you got used to the idea that women like me were already in it, and none of you ever asked what we were hearing. The room broke around that. Then the rear service door opened. Kang Min-jae entered through the employee corridor. No grand entrance, no redemption framed by applause. Just a dark suit, one shoulder still stiff from Riverside, and a man walking through the route he once never noticed in his own buildings. Dojin shot to his feet. This is absurd. Min-jae sat at the witness table and said, coming from you, that's almost flattering. Daniel Brooks's full video played. The shell transfers matched. The witness testimony held. Dojin's lawyer stopped objecting because even he knew when structure becomes surrender. Then Min-jae spoke. He could have polished himself into the victim. He did not. Cha Dojin stole through a system built to reward speed and bury interruption, he said. Yu Hyrin shaped the lie that would protect him. Both should answer for that. He paused and the room leaned closer. I should answer for something as well. I did not steal from Hunnell's redevelopment fund. I did build a company where residents became delays on a chart, where descent looked inefficient, where people cleaning the rooms and writing the risk reports were expected to keep the machine alive and then vanish from its story. Daniel Brooks objected inside a structure I taught people to fear. His voice never rose. That made it stronger. I am not asking to be restored unchanged. The judge froze the District 8 demolition before the hearing adjourned. Prosecutors moved for record preservation and criminal review. Daniel Brooks's name was formally cleared on the preliminary order. One of the women from District 8 in the back row started crying silently when she heard it. That should have been the moment the story ended. It wasn't. Because an hour later, the board offered Min-jae exactly what the old version of him would have lunged for. His chair, his vote, his full power restored. He read the resolution once and set it down. I decline immediate reinstatement, he said. The room erupted. A board member sputtered, You're giving away your own leverage. Min-jae looked at him with a steadiness that no longer felt like domination. That leverage built some of this damage. Then he slid Marcus's filed documents across the table. Recovered control would move into the Restitution and Oversight Trust, District 8 Protections, Resident Review Authority, the Brooks Scholarship and Legal Fund, and independent reporting all activated first. His own personal liability language would remain attached to the negligence that enabled the theft. The silence that followed felt different from the one at the gala. This time it wasn't hunger. It was recalculation, astonishment, the sound people make inside themselves when they realize the man in front of them has become harder to use than the version they destroyed. Late that night, after the cameras thinned and the city began rewriting its loyalties, Min-jae climbed the 6 flights back to Amanda's rooftop apartment carrying takeout and nothing else. She opened the door before he knocked twice. They looked at each other for a second, the whole week sitting between them without either one pretending it hadn't happened. He held up the takeout bag a little awkwardly. Malik said if I brought policy papers again, he'd start charging me rent. Amanda stepped aside and let him in. Grandma Brooks had gone to bed. Malik was pretending to study behind the curtain. The apartment smelled like tea and rain-damp city air. Amanda went to the metal tin, took out one last paper, and set it in front of him. He recognized the template first, then the approval code, then his own digital authorization stamp. 7 years earlier, Daniel Brooks, dependent household support, temporary medical and housing emergency relief. I signed this, he said. You signed thousands like it. He looked up. Amanda's face was tired and steady and completely free of performance. After my father was suspended, before the papers fully shredded what was left of his reputation, my grandmother got sick. We were 1 month from losing the apartment. That approval came through. We got her medication. We bought time, not forever, just enough to breathe. Min-jae read the form again as if it might become a different document if he looked hard enough. Amanda continued, softer now. For years I hated a man whose company helped destroy my family and whose signature, in another corner of that same empire, gave us 1 more month together. When I saw you in the rain, I recognized you immediately. I also recognized the contradiction. He looked at her. Why didn't you tell me then? Because I wasn't interested in giving you a clean way into my sympathy. Amanda folded her arms, then let them fall again. My father left me 1 more note, not the legal one, the real one. He said if Kang Min-jae ever lost power, don't rush to hate him and don't rush to save him. Make him see us first, then decide. That hit him harder than the boardroom had. Amanda stepped closer. The first time you helped my family, you never knew who we were. This time, I wanted you to know exactly who opened the door. For a moment, he couldn't answer. When he did, his voice came out quieter than she had ever heard from him. I don't know how to carry that. Amanda's mouth tilted faintly. Badly at first? That seems to be your style. He laughed then, softly enough not to wake the rest of the room. Months later, District 8 still stood. Scaffolding climbed buildings instead of wrecking balls. Residents argued through long meetings because they finally had power worth arguing over. Malik kept his scholarship and became insufferably opinionated about policy language. Grandma Brooks switched to the expensive tea and dared anybody to complain. Amanda returned to school part-time through the Brooks Fund she had fought hard enough to distrust, and then harder to shape correctly. Min-jae worked from a smaller office with fewer yes-men and more windows that opened. The first time a resident representative told him a proposal was elegant and useless in the same sentence, he almost smiled. One evening he climbed the 6 flights again, this time with no crisis, no lawyers, no evidence files, and no reason to be there except the one that mattered. Amanda opened the door. She looked at him, then at the city behind him, then back at his face. A small smile touched her mouth. You can stay with me, she said. This time the line no longer meant shelter for a fallen man. It meant she had seen who he used to be, seen what he had cost, seen what it had taken to change, and was still choosing the next sentence. And that leaves one real question sitting in the middle of the story. If you were Amanda, would you have opened that door at all? Or would you have let the rain finish what his own world started? Share this with someone who'd argue the answer with you, and subscribe for the next story.